Analytics don't work. Smart guys wanted to fit in, so they made up a term called analytics.
The analytics don't mean anything in football. Take those numbers and you can make them say whatever you want.
The numbers, basically. What do they mean?
Welcome back to the Noise Podcast. Live from Queens, New York, we're here with episode 4 of the show. This season, we're pulling back the curtain on the grind of betting an entire NFL season with an analytical approach, real-time reactions, and an honest look at the highs and lows. Each episode gives you a seat at the table as the NFL season unfolds. Whether you're betting alongside us or just here for the sweat, welcome back to the Noise. All right, we have a lot in store for the episode today. I have a guest coming on in just a few minutes, but first things first, want to do a little bit of a recap of last week, talking about some macro points on the league. A couple surprising outcomes, right? We had a Ravens and Lions game on Monday night that has brought some serious concern for me, right? I'm not quite sure. The Ravens are still my number 1 rated team. I still think very highly of them, but growing a little bit concerned with that defense. Not sure exactly what we're going to do with them as far as future ratings, but we do have some picks out regarding the Ravens in the Noise Discord. And remember, the Discord is the only place to get all of my bets in real time. As soon as they come out, as soon as I get the bet in my account, I'm posting it in the Discord, ready for you to take. Anything I bet live as well, it's also a part of the Discord, which is absolutely free. So whether you're watching on YouTube, listening on Apple Music, Spotify, or your app of choice, check in the description. You'll be able to see the link, jump in the Discord, and join the crew. We'll start again with bad beats. It's been quite the season as far as bad beats goes. I mean, in week 2, we had Denver really just, with that field goal, that penalty, re-kick, that crushed our dreams. That was pretty rough. And then jumping into week 3, we get it right back to us. Packers ruining a bunch of teaser legs across the league, kind of, blowing that 10-0 lead. This is not something that I believe in, right? But there's a league-wide investigation now because of the millions and millions of dollars that were bet on the Packers money line that ended up being lost. So people are looking into point shaving, and apparently the league is cooperating with authorities on whether or not there was any foul play involved. I don't get into that too much, but just to kind of understand the gravity of how big of a loss that was. If you use Packers in Survivor, right, we gave out the Seattle Seahawks as our Survivor play, which came through easily. But, any entry that you use the Packers on, which, it does include 1 or 2 of mine, that's a tough break. That's a tough break for us. So Packers down, and then obviously my bad beat of the week, bad beat of the century. I think what I'm going to do is kind of keep a running list of this throughout the season. So right now, number 1 is the Rams plus 4.5. Number 2 is Denver, and then I'll put my Packers teaser leg as a shorter number 3. Maybe even number 4 to the Ravens blowing a 3-score lead on Sunday Night Football Week 1. But let's just quickly review this Rams game, right? Rams are kind of leading most of the game. And honestly, finally, we see out of Philly some offensive vigor, right? We finally see them open the playbook a little bit. I think this is the first time I've seen A.J. Brown get multiple catches in a game. The offense showed you that they have the ability to move the ball, right? Jalen Hurts is not washed, right? The offensive coordinator is not useless. I'm not saying all that. I think Philly is kind of doing this thing that we see the Chiefs do. We see other great teams have done in the past where they kind of hide some of their good plays when they don't need it, especially seeing Philly at 3-0, right? They haven't necessarily needed to open the playbook, open the offense. But, as bettors and as fans, I think we'd like to see Philly do that a little bit more. I think we'd like to see Philly not play so boring, quite frankly. That being said, right, they finally do so in the second half of this Week 3 matchup with the Rams, and they looked pretty good. the issue was that the Rams kind of got whatever they wanted on the Philly defense. Obviously, the Rams offense with Sean McVay is well known for being pretty creative and using a lot of motions and stuff. With Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams, they have looked really good. Kyron Williams ran the ball really well against a tough Philly defense, but they just got super conservative. And again, we talk about this every week with head coaches, someone like Sean McVay, someone like John Harbaugh, someone like Kyle Shanahan. They are perfectly fine being the best coach, one of the better coaches in the league for the first half, for 3/4 of a game. And when it comes down to it, a critical decision or the decision to be too conservative is costing these teams constantly. And I think you see that with the Rams, where they should have been able to put this game away much earlier, but highly conservative play call allowed Philly to claw back in this game. And then, down 27-26, the Rams get an opportunity to kick a game-winning field goal. When you're us, when you have plus 4.5, game closes 3.5, you feel great, got a little CLV, got a great bet in the account. What it feels like, doesn't matter if they make or miss this kick. I don't care. I don't have any future equity in either of these teams. I'm good. What's the one thing that can't happen? Philadelphia blocks the kick, runs it down for a touchdown. I think that's the fastest I've ever seen someone that large run. I mean, I don't blame him for wanting to score, even though if he dropped at any point in time, the game still would have ended and I would have won my bet. I don't blame him for running that out, but man, that is got to be up there for one of the toughest beats that I can remember, and that's going to stick with me for a while. So we'll kind of refresh this. Hopefully next week I don't start the episode with any bad beats, but we'll kind of keep a running tally as we go along. All right, and it's time to bring in our special guest for this episode. It's the man, the myth, the legend. You know him as the Gridiron Greek. I'm here with Themi Michalakis. Themi, what's going on, man?
Hey, Max. What's going on?
It's good to be back, Themi. So we are, well, first and foremost, thank you and congratulations for being the inaugural guest on the re-up of the Noise podcast.
Yeah, it feels really great to come back to where I kind of started.
Yeah, I know. So yeah, Themi is one of the original staff writers of the Noise Media. So yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. Again, this is a few years later, right? Like we're kind of jumping back into this. Where do you stand? What have you been up to? What's going on?
Yeah, well, my relationship with writing has kind of been all over the place. So, started with the Noise. I mean, it really wasn't my first official writing job, but it was the first one I really cared about putting effort into.
Right.
But right now I'm with Fantrax, doing a few fantasy football articles for them every week. But before that, I had a Substack where I was kind of writing about betting, getting my teaser picks in, my Themi's teasers, because I have to have a good name for it,
Right.
But I'm really enjoying things with Fantrax and just getting back into the fantasy space while also kind of doing my betting on the side.
Right. So what's your output look like for Fantrax? How many articles are you doing?
Yeah, so I'm doing 3 articles a week for them. So I'm talking about defense streamers, and then I'm doing a Sunday Night Football preview and a Monday Night Football preview, kind of focusing on fantasy implications, especially kind of like lesser known guys, or if not lesser, just not the obvious studs. So for like the past week, I brought up Rashad Bateman and his usage. His routes run and his snap share with the Ravens was great. So I saw kind of an opportunity there for him to maybe have a good game against the Lions. And, he did. I didn't really expect him to have that great of a game. And, he really impressed me. But I try to focus on sort of lesser guys, not like the Zay Flowers or the Amon-Ra St. Browns.
Sure. And we'll talk a little bit about maybe that Ravens game in a few minutes. But thinking about, so my question to you is, when are your articles coming out? How do people see them, right? Is it more of a, who do I swap last minute on a Sunday, or am I setting my lineup based on your thoughts?
Well, the defense streamer article is definitely something where you kind of do that way before Sunday. That's dropping every Wednesday. So it's after the fallout of waivers. It's like right after that. So the roster ships are going to change a little bit. I try to note the roster ships on Fantrax as well as other notable platforms, just so people have an idea. I'm not giving, the top end defenses. Like, you're not streaming the Vikings or the Steelers. It's
right.
I get into like the 50, 60%, and then I get into the lower kind of, tier guys. So that's every Wednesday. And then the Sunday and Monday ones, it's a lot harder for people to plan their fantasy football, start sit decisions based on that. The Sunday one will come out Sunday morning, so you'll have the opportunity to read that and see if you have any of these guys rostered on the waiver wire. The Monday one, I think maybe people could use more for something like DFS.
Yeah.
It's not something that I would say is like a DFS Bible for sure, because I don't specifically put it out for DFS, but you want to manage your budget in that kind of game.
Right.
So having lesser known guys that you can look into is obviously a benefit.
Yeah, so maybe something for like a showdown, captain showdown, that you see on a single game slate. That could be something that people use. So I'll drop the links to Themi's article page on the YouTube and on the podcast description, so everyone can check out your work over there, pal.
Awesome.
So I think a lot of what the podcast revamped, as I'm calling it, is kind of all about is not only talking about, these are our professional opinions. This is what we think of the games. What is it like in real life, right? How are we actually doing this? So, a theme that's pretty common is, what's the work-life balance? What's that look like? And, I'm not sure if I've really talked about it on this podcast so much specifically, but, kind of how work-life balance doesn't really exist. And, you really need to just have passion for what you're doing, right? I love gambling. I have to determine if I have to keep that in the show or not.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. I don't feel like I'm burnt out by, putting in hours studying lineups or studying lines or doing stuff like that. So for you, what's that like from a fantasy perspective? And how are you managing that with your day to day?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's like a passion thing. When you do something like this, even when part of it is kind of a job, writing articles, for example, or doing a podcast, there's still a lot of passion behind it. Like there's a reason that we do this kind of thing, and it doesn't feel as much like work. There are times when it definitely feels like work. Like
absolutely. When you have a deadline or something.
Like it really sucks. Like having to tell my friends like, hey, I have to go home early because I have to like finish writing this article. They're like, are you kidding me? Like you just got back from your job. We're going out now, and you have to go write an article.
Yeah. And
I'm like, yeah, like I have a deadline. But yeah. Listen, the work-life balance is kind of where you determine it to be.
Right.
I wrote for a variety of websites. I wrote on my own Substack for a little bit, and I would write for Fantrax. And when I applied to write with them and spoke to them about it and the opportunity, I kind of mentioned like, hey, I used to write a lot, and it just took a lot of my days. It took a lot of my free time. I'd rather scale things back, focus on pieces that I really enjoy and feel like I can provide value in them. And so that I can have somewhat of a work-life balance instead of overloading myself each and every week.
Yeah, that's great perspective, honestly. And, that's something that people will often struggle with, in their day-to-day lives, not just something that you're risking money with, getting burnt out, being overworked, not, having the love for the game as much anymore. And it's an interesting point to make, to relate it back to gambling and what we do, right? If you're burnt out to the extent that you're not going through your process correctly, you're not adjusting your numbers the way that you should be, right? It's going to be an issue for you. So I think that's a kind of a interesting thing to think about. It's not all fun and games, right? We could be a TikTok scammer, and I could show you 5 Lamborghinis and say, look how much money I bet, but that might not be reality. So, we've kind of been through the ups and downs of gambling as far as wins and losses go. And, I guess to kind of circle it back to your work, how do you feel like the space is changing as far as writing goes? Where there's a lot of AI and, kind of less of an, people are still reading their Sunday morning articles and stuff like that. But, how do you feel about where our space is right now?
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing because I don't have a ton of experience in this space. Legal gambling only happened in the United States around the time of COVID.
2019 PASPA, right?
And that's around the time that I did turn, of age to legally gamble.
Yeah.
And I wasn't the type where I would go offshore because that really wasn't like a world that I even kind of knew about. Heading into like all of this stuff,
especially for you having a fantasy background, right?
Yeah, exactly. And like fantasy kind of was my gambling in a way. Actually, like the first thing I really did in terms of like gambling, when I was like doing my homework and just procrastinating it and not doing it, I would go on ESPN and I would just look at all the games. I would note the spreads, and then I would just circle the team that I thought was going to cover the spread each week. Like no money on it, nothing, just like me trying to outsmart, like I guess the world, like Vegas in a way.
I'm gonna clip that for sure. Me trying to outsmart the world.
Yeah, like I mean, who doesn't get into this space kind of thinking like, you know what, I'm pretty smart. Like I think I can figure out this game that people have put, millions of dollars into and the greatest technology in the world.
Right. So that's I guess that's kind of leading right into my next question is like, how did you get into it, and do you follow the same path as a lot of us of, I know football, I know sports, I must be able to bet on it because I know these teams so well, like, which is a fallacy, but at the same time, it's kind of how all of us get into it.
Yeah, it's definitely something we all kind of know is wrong, like to think that way because, but it just makes sense in a way. Like it's one of those like paradoxical things. Like the more you kind of know about a sport, the less good you're going to be at actually betting it, because then you get these preconceived notions. You start to think like, oh, this team always beats this team no matter how good they are, which could be the case, but it's like you can't look at it through that lens. I did get into it trying to think that I could outsmart the books and just show off my knowledge of football. When we were younger, we had all this time in the world. We didn't have responsibilities. We didn't have, taxes and jobs and things. Sure, we had school, but I was reading Bleacher Report and ESPN all day, every day, just absorbing knowledge. I used to know the Steelers like stats by heart. I could tell you how much Antonio Brown had, each and every week, basically. And because of that knowledge, it kind of made me think, I kind of do know football. Like I would talk to people that like really didn't know football and they'd say, oh, well, this team is good. And I'd be like, well, actually, this bad team is actually in this stat and this stat, they're actually pretty good. And, those were like baseline stats, like whatever, like sacks, something like that.
That's funny you mentioned too with your Steelers, right? I think what's either 2020 or 2021, I forgot. One of Ben Roethlisberger's last years, they were like 9-0, and all we were saying was like, this is the worst 9-0 team I've ever seen. Like, and I'm not saying it was you, but Steelers fans across the world, thinking they're going to win the Super Bowl, and I think they ended up, with 10 or 11 wins that year.
I think I don't know if we didn't go 11-0. We went pretty high though. I think it was 9-0.
Definitely 9-0, maybe even 10.
Yeah, and I think we might have versed Washington when they snapped our streak. Whoever it was, I think it was Washington. But yeah, like people look at record. People look at a team like the Indianapolis Colts this year, and they say like, well, Daniel Jones has it, and I'm not here to declare that the Colts are washed or that the Colts are great, but it's something you have to think about. A small sample size, like the NFL is already a small sample size,
right?
Even with the expansion to 17 games. There's just not enough information, especially early on, to declare that just because of wins, a team is simply better than another team.
Yeah.
That's where you kind of start diving into stats and saying like, okay, what preconceived notions that I have about a specific team or a player or a unit, and are there any stats that kind of disprove it? I think that also kind of gets into like trying to justify your own bets and thoughts.
Of course. Yeah.
You kind of start looking like, all right, well, they're not good at like pass blocking, but they're pretty good at run blocking.
Yeah.
Even though the matchup kind of doesn't dictate it, but.
So what are you looking at on a week-to-week basis? Like, what are your favorite stats is the nerdiest question I've ever asked. But, what are your, top indicators that you're looking at, to evaluate a team?
I think I've kind of leaned against DVOA a lot, maybe to a fault. For those that don't know, DVOA is a stat that Aaron Schatz created. It stands for Defense Adjusted Value Over Average. And it's kind of looking at teams and, the offense and defense relative to how a league average team would do, or adjusted for the defense that they're playing. So, if a team is playing the Cleveland Browns every week, their stats are going to look much worse than if they're versing the Dallas Cowboys, because one defense is just simply better than another most of the time over the course of multiple games.
Right.
And so I really like DVOA because it kind of, becomes sort of a baseline for me in a way to kind of determine how well a team has been performing. I don't think it's quite predictive. It's very descriptive.
Yeah, it is. But I mean, no free plugs on the Noise podcast, but FTN does have within that, DVOA subscription, the ability to translate DVOA into their, point spread model, which again is pretty interesting to look at. And I think Aaron Schatz even would agree you shouldn't bet solely based on that. But, it is one of the better metrics we have. No free promos on the Noise podcast. But yeah.
But yeah, that is something that I really like looking at. I look at EPA per play, that kind of thing, but I feel like early on, both will kind of agree with each other just because nothing's really been adjusted yet. But that's just kind of like a starting point, especially early in the season. DVOA or EPA, there's no perfect stat that's going to tell you how good a team is just yet.
Right.
Like let's go back to the Colts. They played the Miami Dolphins and the Tennessee Titans, two teams that most people would agree are probably in the bottom half of the league, maybe bottom 5.
One might say the worst in the league.
I mean,
offensively.
one could possibly say that, Max. I don't want to. It feels so weird calling a team bottom 5 when I see like flashes of like goodness in them.
For Miami, yes.
Miami for sure, much more than Tennessee.
Yeah, Tennessee. I mean, listen, what do you think of this? Like, right, Brian Callahan potentially being the first coach fired, I'm interested in, but also Brian Callahan giving up play calling and going to their quarterbacks coach. I've never seen this before. I've looked at every team this year. There's not one quarterbacks coach that calls the plays. Why did they skip over the OC?
Yeah, it's a very strange team.
Yeah.
Bad teams are going to do bad and stupid things, but like you feel like eventually they're going to get it right. And you just kind of wonder, like, is this a Hail Mary? Is this kind of like him trying to save his job and say, like, all right, listen, like, I'm going to do something innovative? Like, do I even call it innovative?
No, I agree with you.
Like, am I smarter than an NFL head coach? No, but
yeah.
But sometimes you have to like.
Well, maybe.
I just might be.
And this is what we talked about with Brian Dable, and I mean, as is public news now, right? Russell Wilson is out as the starter, and Jackson Dart getting the start this weekend. We'll talk about that a little bit, but Brian Dable has those two bullets in the chamber of, okay, the Giants are 0-3. What the hell is going on in New York? All right, let's get off Russ. Let's go to Jameis. If Jameis is still bad, let's get off Jameis and go to Dart. Now, it so happened they went right to Dart, which means that he almost kind of wasted one of those bullets. Or, they could still pull Dart and say, all right, like, I don't want my rookie to get hurt. We saw enough from him, whatever. You might get a phantom injury like J.J. McCarthy has. But, that is a really good point about how head coaches and front offices kind of, they have these moves that they're prepared to make just because they know what the media circus is going to look like, and in a way saves their job.
Yep.
Or helps them save face at least.
Yeah, and there's a big risk reward aspect to it. Like Brian Dable, if he was a newer coach who had more time, I think he probably would let Jackson Dart sit and just let the Giants, use Russ, use Jameis. But you don't really have all that time as Brian Dable anymore. Like, you had the one good season, you made it to the playoffs.
Talk about, teams that shouldn't have been in the playoffs, right?
Yeah, like and going back to DVOA, I think DVOA said they were like one of the worst teams to make the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if people like looking at those gritty teams, those gritty wins, something the Giants were kind of like known for with Eli Manning at least.
Yeah.
But one season can't save a coach like that. And I think the writing's kind of on the wall. And so that's why I think it makes sense that he is kind of pulling that lever and going to Dart.
Yeah.
But, it might have been better for, the Giants as a whole to let Brian Dable sit Dart for the rest of the season. And it's kind of just figuring out, does the head coach get to make that decision and, save his job at possibly the expense of the team's like future?
Yeah. I mean, that's something that people, will struggle with all the time with their team. It's like you have all these individual guys, right? Like, I always try to make this clear. Like, players don't tank. Coaches and more importantly, front offices tank. Yes, sometimes players are put in positions that are not good and, they're almost expected to fail in these positions. But I don't think that there's many a player in the NFL that's going out there and not trying as hard as he can.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe George Pickens or DJ Moore might have something
Russell.
to say. Yeah. But, for the most part, right, like a player is not going to be not trying at all. So it's interesting to kind of see where that falls in. And, to me, I think Dable's going to be done. I think he survives the year and they kind of go another direction with, the Jackson Dart led Giants in 2026. But I would like to see if Brian Dable can resurface somewhere as an OC. Perhaps in a couple of years.
Yeah, I think we've seen a lot of coaches kind of fall that way where they just don't have the chops to be a head coach. At
Mike
least,
McDaniel, perhaps.
Yep. Arthur Smith. I mean, I still don't think he's like a phenomenal OC, but he's a better OC than he is a head coach because there's just so much that goes into being a head coach. Like,
Absolutely.
Mike Tomlin, he's like a player's kind of guy. He knows how to like keep personalities in order, and people have taken notice to that. But he's also a good defensive guy. Would he be a better defensive coordinator than a head coach? I don't know, but there's definitely guys where it seems like they definitely are just not cut out to be a head coach.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and again, this is a common theme of the podcast is the decision making. We're going to rag on Brian Callahan because I do think he is the worst coach in the NFL. Yeah. I mean, I'll take you through this really quick. This sequence, right, at the end of the first half of their game against the Colts. 47 seconds left. Indianapolis calls a timeout on 4th and 1 where Tennessee has the ball. They look like they're going to go for it. Tennessee then takes a subsequent timeout. And then after that, they set up and they still get a delay of the game. So now they have 4th and 6th, and they attempt a 62-yard field goal rather than, go for it on 4th and 1 or kick it on 4th and 1. Like, whichever decision they made would have been better than getting a penalty after calling a timeout, which is just like sacrilegious for an NFL team. Naturally, they miss the field goal. It actually gets blocked. And then the Colts are able to get their own field goal. And they take what would have been a 17 to, I believe. So they were up 20. Yeah, it was 20-6 at halftime. So what would have been a 17-9 lead ended up being a 20-6 lead. And it's just egregious how coaches are able to get away with this. And yeah, maybe Brian Callahan could go somewhere and be a very fine coordinator. But when it comes to in-game decision-making, the guy simply doesn't have it.
I think a lot of coaches have really bad clock management issues, and just especially at the end of halves and like the second half especially, it just seems like they're just like lost. And I know it's different for us watching the game because we get to see everything at once. We don't have to worry about actually calling the plays, getting the guys in and off the field. Like there's a lot of tunnel vision that I'm sure goes off, for coaches. But you'd think like eventually a team would just have a guy on the sideline kind of assisting the coach and that sort of thing.
I have been advocating for that for literal years. And I have to believe that some coaches do have a guy in their ear that maybe he sits upstairs in the booth and he's just like, hey, EPA, expected point says go for it. And, whether the coach listens to him or not, that's a whole other story. But I have to believe that some coaches have that already. Why it isn't like widely known, or that's a different story, but why some coaches clearly don't have it is just unbelievable to me. How do you not know when to take your timeouts, right? How do you not know how to manage your timeouts before or after the 2-minute warning? Bill Belichick kind of made a career off of this before he too became a little bit, too old for the times. But in the mid 2000s, nobody managed the clock better than Belichick. And that was a serious advantage. And at a certain point becomes part of the handicap. You have to account for that when you have such a huge coaching mismatch. And we're seeing it today. And I think it is more egregious than ever, where you have certain coaches that get it and certain coaches that simply don't.
Yeah, discipline is like a really big thing that's lacking for a lot of players and coaches. I used to watch like top 10 smartest plays in the NFL.
Right.
Guys like on the sidelines, like getting a punt or a kick, so that it's like technically a kick out of bounds, and they get a penalty so they can move down the field better. But all I can think of, like when you're talking about that, is Caleb Johnson, getting hit by a ball on a kickoff and it going into the end zone and him just like standing there.
Yeah.
They ask him at the end of the game, like, did you know about the rule or not? And he kind of goes like, it doesn't matter if I knew about it or not. I should have not made that play, which kind of leads me to believe that he didn't know the rule. Listen, he's a rookie. Rookies make mistakes. Players make mistakes. They're human beings. Like I'm not going to go and like rag on the guy because, he made a mistake. Like if it was one of us, like we'd be like, wow, the heat of the moment.
Right.
But when it comes to like a coach, it's such a bigger thing. Yeah. Because like you dictate all the play. Like you're in the meetings, like going back to Bill Belichick, and you hear like these podcasts like Julian Edelman talking about or like any former Patriots kind of talking about Bill Belichick. He made sure like everybody knew what everything was, every penalty, every like place on the field. What the defense is going to do, even if you're not even versing the defense. Like probably had the kicker learning like who the third string quarterback was in case they have to go out and tackle.
At the end of the day, right? That's your job, right? Yeah. Yes, it's the NFL and it's football. It's all these athletes are always saying, "Oh, it's a children's game. I'm so blessed that I could play a game for a living." But I think we understand, especially with the NFL, how much work and preparation goes in, and because the NFL is really boils down to like 60 plays a game, right? Like, that's the entire NFL. You spend a week preparing for that game. You have all these, intricate schemes and XYZ, and, your team runs a few, less than 100 plays, right? Like less than 100 instances within that game. It's so different than any other sport, like basketball, right? You have a 24-second shot clock. How many possessions are there going to be? Baseball, how many pitches are there going to be, and stuff like that. Football, again, to your original point, right? It's such a small sample size. So it's really, really frustrating, yet so common that in this small sample size, we just get this super wide range. And it's incredibly frustrating when that's a result of just a lack of discipline.
You'd think that, like, with a sport like this, there's 32 teams. There's only 32 head coach spots. They've got to be some of the smarter minds in football, or the best people at doing everything that comes with being a head coach. Like, wouldn't you want to squeeze every last drop of like advantage that you can get? Wouldn't clock management and focusing on penalties be one of the bigger things to you? Because it affects a game so much. I wonder if it's just a player thing, if it's hard to like coach players to not be able to do something, because there was like that Giants player who committed four penalties on the offensive line.
Well, he also punched someone in the face. I don't know if you can coach that, but
I mean, you should definitely tell him not to punch someone in the face. I think they said that in the meeting. I was told
there.
I was told by a good source.
My insider at the Giants told me, they said, please don't punch that guy.
I was there with some binoculars. I had John Boy next to me lip reading for me. So,
no, yeah. I mean, it's a good point though, right? Like, how do you not? I mean, I think also the macro point to that is, right, like, if you're going to have your Mike Tomlin, right, your leader of men, absolute, everybody loves the guy, everybody loves to play for him. And I'm not even saying that he does this particularly well, but if you have someone like him, make sure you get your OC right so that your offensive play calling is handled by somebody else. Make sure your defensive coordinator is running exactly what you want to see run, so that your job as the head coach is to make good decisions. And if you don't do that well, hire somebody else on your staff to help you make those clock management and XYZ decisions. I don't think Tomlin does this well at all, actually, but I'm using him as an example of like clear, everybody loves to play for the guy. Maybe Pete Carroll, also terrible example, because I don't think Chip Kelly's watched an NFL game in 6 years. But in a hypothetical situation, right, where Pete Carroll hires Chip Kelly, and Chip Kelly runs a great offense, their DC, I don't even know who it is anymore.
No clue.
They have a good scheme, and Carroll hires somebody else to help him make decisions, just so that people who want to play for Pete Carroll, well-known, nice guy, they come and play for him. I would love to see that model happen in the NFL. And I think the closest thing we might have seen, dare I say, was Dan Campbell last year.
I'm so glad you said that. I was thinking the whole time, Dan Campbell.
Right.
But I think that also comes down to something else that a lot of people have started to pick up on as well, which is ownership. The family that owns the Lions, they passed that team down to their daughter, who made a lot of changes. That's around the time Dan Campbell came in. That's around the time they started winning more games,
right,
and looked more like a real team, like a modern real team. And so, like, when we talk about teams like the Raiders, the Steelers, the Giants, you look at ownership, and it's been the same guy for a really long time. And I'm not saying that they have to sell the teams.
No, I am.
Okay, for your Giants, okay, sure.
John Mara, Woody Johnson, Mark, what was the Raiders guy? Whatever.
Oh
Mark with the fucking
Davis.
bowl cut.
Mark Davis, Al Davis' son, yeah. I mean, listen, we've seen teams. I mean, even the Colts, Ursay's daughter now has control of the team, and they look good. She's on the sidelines, kind of like watching to make.
Does she look good, Themi?
I don't pay attention to that,
Yeah, no, that was like a big meme with her on the sidelines,
which I thought was goofy. And like, listen, it could still be a goofy thing, but it seems like she actually cares about winning football games, which is a really big thing, because a lot of teams don't seem to do that. I was reading a stat about the Steelers. Apparently, we hire like the lowest amount of staff of any team. Our facilities are awful. I know the Rooney family isn't rich in terms of like the same way that like the Cronkies are, or like anything like that, like the top end of the NFL. But these are still like billion-dollar owners. Like, even looking at the Bengals, who I think have the lowest like net worth in terms of the family, and like known for being kind of a cheap team. Yeah. But I mean, like, other like small markets have like rich owners. But I guess it's been in the family for a long time, so it makes sense for the Bengals. But I think like ownership just needs to like cede to a younger person who's willing to take it over. And if not, they just need to sell the team. And I know they won't. They won't
Right.
because it makes so much money. It's
Yeah,
such a
why would
safe
they, right?
investment.
Yeah.
Unless you're ready to retire and just be like, I'm over this. Give me my $6 billion for like, the worst franchise. It's just not going to happen until unfortunately someone passes away or is just like really, really old and willing to like give it up.
Yeah, and they have a son or daughter that
Yeah.
really wants to, get involved, or they have a business partner that like wants to get more involved with the team in a positive way. And we're not looking at Jerry Jones as a good example of this. But just want to switch gears, kind of wrap this up. Again, really appreciate you for coming on, Themi. What everybody wants to know is what do you got this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, I really like toned my betting and looking into things back, but there are definitely things I really like. I really like doing teasers this year. I feel like teasers have been so far for the past 3 weeks, fingers crossed, knock on wood, pretty successful for the most part.
Did you have the Packers last week?
Okay. Well, I was gonna say minus the only teaser leg I've lost this year out of like maybe like 12 legs has been the Packers, and that was just a series of unfortunate events. Leading 10-0 heading into the fourth. Okay, you let up a field goal, whatever. Then a stupid interception by Jordan Love, then a blocked field goal to set up another field goal. It was the week of blocked field goals.
The special teams this week was just absurd. I talked about a little bit before you got on air about how that Eagles game went. So I'll spare the listeners because I had already talked about this, but the special teams this week was just unbelievable. But focusing on week 4, what do you got for me?
Okay, well, I really do like the Seahawks this week at Arizona. I know it's a divisional matchup, and divisional away matchups can be pretty tough, way more than people kind of give it credit for. Things can go either way. I guess anything can go either way, but I feel like divisional away matchups, especially the NFC West, just seems like a dogfight half the time.
Absolutely.
But I really do like the Seahawks this year. I've loved their defense. I kind of really hated my Steelers going up against Mike McDonald in that defense because I was used to him building a great Ravens defense, and then to just face like another really good one, really sucked. I think Sam Darnold's perfectly fine. I think he's a serviceable, above average quarterback. He has good weapons there. I really like JSN. I like the running backs. I think Kenneth Walker is really good. Zach Charbonnet is like also a very good, complimentary or like 1B kind of guy.
We got to check his injury status for this week.
But against the Arizona Cardinals, I think I saw it at a pick 'em at one point, but I think it's minus 1.5 now.
Yeah, so actually a bunch of market support for your position, right? This opened up -1, -1.5 for Arizona, which we kind of talked about a bit in the Discord, just kind of questioning whether or not that's the right line. I personally didn't play it. I kind of wanted to see how the injury news develops, which so far has not developed super well for the Cardinals, right? The DB room is really messy with injury. James Conner obviously going down, and I think an important thing to note as well with your Seahawks play, right? The move through 0 is not really significant, right? A lot of people kind of mess that up a little bit, where it's like, oh well, they were a 1-point underdog and now they're a 1-point favorite. It actually, like, that's not a big deal, and that's probably one of the least significant moves there are. So if anyone's worried about not getting the best of the line, obviously, right, we're trying to beat the lines, we're trying to get closing line value, but in this scenario, I think laying -1 with Seattle is perfectly fine.
Yeah. And going through the zeros, actually, it's really interesting you say that, because if it was like Seattle -1 and it moved up to -2, would people really care that much about it?
Right.
It's kind of that perception thing. Like, it just feels like, oh my God, they weren't favored and now they're favored. Like, I do fall for that trap a lot of the times. Like, just psychologically.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a mind game, and the move from 1 to 2 is much more significant than +1 to -1. So, but yeah, we'll mark you down for the Seahawks this Thursday. And anything else you like this week that is going on your official record?
Okay, yeah. Is this like, do I get to like see every week how everyone does? Like, I want to have like a full record book at one point.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna start to do like a guest chair type of thing.
Okay.
And, because I'm like 0-5, so no. Yeah, I think I'm gonna do some sort of guest chair or whatever. So
okay,
we'll give you the Seahawks, and if you want to add anything, you're welcome.
I'll throw in a Themi's teaser of the week, I guess.
There you go. Okay.
So with the news of Jackson Dart It looks like the Chargers have moved from -6 to -6.5. It might have even moved more ever since I checked that this morning.
In the Noise Discord, we gave out -5.5
Oh,
on
did
Sunday
you?
night.
But what's it looking at now?
Yeah, I got you at 6.5, pretty much across market.
Okay, and I'm willing to tease them down to -0.5. You know, just straight up win that game. You know, a new quarterback coming in kind of scares me a little bit because you know teaser leg, you have to win at such a high rate. It's like 73-ish or something. 73.2. I don't know. Off the top of my head, I can't tell you. But
yeah, that's right.
So you don't want uncertainty. You want like certainty, which is why it's a little tough when it comes to like a rookie quarterback. But I think what the Chargers have shown us is just really dominant. They have a few injuries on the defensive side.
Yep.
But I'm still willing to take them against the Giants down to just a money line at that point. And I would pair them with the Broncos against the Bengals. I think Broncos are -7.
Yeah, I'll give you -7.5 on that one.
Okay, so they'll have to cover 1.5, and I'm perfectly fine with that.
It's the Wong, right? The Wong teaser.
Yep, the Wong teaser guidelines. I still like following them. I mean, teasers have gotten expensive now.
Yeah. So that's a PSA to everyone, right? If you're going to be betting a teaser, you do not want to bet more than -120 on a 2-team 6-point teaser. Do not bet more than -120. You, again, if you're betting on DraftKings or FanDuel, you're going to be paying like -134 right now, which is the price gouge of the century. But if you look elsewhere, offshore or, you know, unfriendly places, right, you'll be able to get down.
I think DraftKings actually moved to -140. I think I saw that right before the season started because that's where I used to go for teasers because they were still -120 on that.
They were last year or 2 years ago.
And now it's very hard, especially in New York where we're so limited with sportsbooks.
Yeah.
We have like 6 or 7 here. It's really. I mean, they might have given out a couple more licenses, but it's still incredibly limited. If you're not living in like a Jersey or a Vegas, I don't know. Is Colorado a good state too? I think
Colorado, Jersey, Illinois. Well, not anymore with the new like tax and stuff like that. This is not going to be the Noise Tax podcast. But, Michigan's a good state as well.
Okay.
But. Yeah, Vegas is tough for online stuff. Obviously, for like shopping in person, it's great, but online is pretty bad in Nevada.
Yeah, I've heard you can't even like really deposit on your phone. Like you have to go physically and deposit first.
Yeah, there's a bunch of weird like stipulations like that.
Very old school over there.
Yeah, honestly, like that's I mean, I don't want to take up all your time, but like that's a weird thing that people say, like, oh, Vegas knows or Vegas made the call, and it's like like lines aren't even made in Vegas, like. These are like all these random European operators. Like Vegas is like all these sports books in Vegas. Like they're just copying stuff. And then, half the places in Vegas that people cite, right? Like Caesars and MGM and stuff like that. That's not, they started in Las Vegas, but like that's not a Vegas line. Like it's just like a, colloquialism, I guess. But it's just like a pet peeve of mine when people say, oh, Vegas made the call.
Yeah, with CeeDee Lamb. No. I mean, I don't want to take up too much time, but CeeDee Lamb, got hurt in the game and with the Cowboys game this past week. And he played one snap in the second
he tried to come
quarter,
back in.
And they were saying, oh, it's because they couldn't void the bets anymore. And it's like, do you think really like that the Cowboys are doing that? Like,
come on, man. I just don't believe. And some sportsbooks still did void bets, right? Fanatics, right?
A lot of them do good faith to just keep people coming.
I'm not a fan of it. I could do a whole
because
session.
then if they don't void it, then people get upset and they're like, "Where's my void?" And it's like that's not the rule. It's just a courtesy that they've been granting you.
And it's like what if you bet something else, right? Like let's say you bet the under on Kevontae Turpin in that game, right? Expecting CeeDee Lamb to get a 35% target share. CeeDee Lamb goes down, right? You get smoked on your under. Do you get a fair play bet now?
Can I get my Packers
they tell
back?
You to go fuck yourself.
Can I get my Packers back? Because they shouldn't have lost to the Browns. I mean, let's be real. Like,
right. So it's like I'm just not a fan of that whole thing, and I really hate the whining and complaining that you see on Twitter and social media. Don't get me wrong. If it's like a promo that's a one-sided market, I like that, right? Mm-hmm. Like if they have, let's just say Saquon Barkley to score boosted and he gets hurt. I like that they give that back because that's a one-sided market that they basically put down your throat. So I like when they offer it on that. But on a regular two-way market, on a regular game, like, just because 50 million people are putting way too much money on CeeDee Lamb. Like, come on, guys. Like, we got to grow up.
And people are always taking overs, which is like,
of course, right?
Like I always see people like send me their parlays and they're like, "What do you think?" And I'm like, listen, I don't know if the under is actually like a good bet in this case, but the fact that you have like 17 overs in a row, or like whether it's a player prop or the actual over under for the game, it's like you're just looking at it being like, okay, this is a good player. This seems like a good matchup or like a bad defense. I'm going to take the over, which is just not the proper way to approach it. It's a good starting point, but it's not the way to actually like make that bet.
Right. I mean, we could talk about, this forever, and I will talk ad nauseum about, how people do like those ladder challenges or like, 10K to a million, whatever nonsense. And then every play is like, a 6 leg parlay with every leg is minus 250. And, they win a couple in a row and then they're shocked when they lose. And it's just like, I'm tired. I'm really tired of this stuff. And again, this is why we're here, right? Because I'm not coming at this like I'm a professional bettor. This is all I do. We don't do that because I win like this. No, that's just bad math. And you're getting tricked and bamboozled and fooled by, these guys, like we said before, that go on TikTok and show a Lamborghini and act like they won that betting on sports. Like, no, you rented that and you made a stupid parlay. I hope you win. I really do. But you're not in the long run. Rant aside, we're going to wrap this up, Themi. Thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. Any final notes or words for the crowd?
Man, it's just good to be back and talking about all this stuff.
Good to be back, baby. Thanks, Themi.
Thanks, Max.
Thanks again to my guy, Themi, for coming on this episode of the Noise Podcast. Last notes for you guys before we go. We'll talk about our Survivor play this week, and I will give out my Frozen lock. So, a little bit of homework. A little bit of cleanup really quick. I double checked my Survivor entry in the millions. So I actually used the Steelers in week 1. I mentioned using Arizona, and I do have an entry that went Arizona, Dallas, Seattle. But the Noise Podcast will be tracking my millions entry, which is placed on DraftKings, total prize being $1.2 million. So for those purposes, my week 1 pick was the Steelers. So we still have that available, or we still have Arizona available for us to use later on. So this week, tough week. There are quite a few options. Obviously, I think quite a lot of people are going to use the Buffalo Bills if they didn't use them already. And we kind of talked about the future equity of the Bills. You want one of the best teams in the league later on, right? If you're playing in Circa or any of those contests that have specialty weeks that require you to pick someone on Thanksgiving or Christmas, right? You want to consider who you're going to be able to use then. So saving a team like the Bills, which are the number 1 or 2 best team in the league, is giving you a lot of opportunity to protect your entry later on. Again, we did mention last week as well, you got to get there first, right? We're not going to be overly conservative, but I think this week with a lot of options, we can kind of cross off the Bills. I would imagine this is a 25 to 30% usage in any pool that you're playing in. I do think that the Bills have little to no shot of losing to the New Orleans Saints, but it's just not a play that I'm going to be using this week. So looking down the board, other opportunities, right? The Detroit Lions, they are 9.5 point favorites against the Browns, who just upset the Packers, crushed a lot of dreams there. We're looking at the Broncos, which are 7.5 to 7 point favorites against the Bengals. You saw Themi just use them as one of his teasers, one of his teaser legs this week. Even the Chargers, even on the road against a rookie quarterback, not my favorite, but still a 6.5 point favorite in this matchup. So these are all teams that I am considering. And again, with a multi-entry strategy right now, I will be playing all of them in some capacity. Oh, not the Chargers, but I will be playing both Denver and the Lions in some capacity. I do think, again, looking down the line, there is some future equity in the Lions. I think the Broncos might be one of the most interesting just because you don't get as many opportunities to go against the Bengals. Joe Burrow is going to be out for an extended period of time, but Browning is an interesting case where I still am not ready to write him off. I think that he has shown enough in previous seasons that I don't think he's a terrible quarterback, despite playing horribly against the Vikings defense. They had him in a blender, right? Brian Flores is schemed way too well. Browning was erratic. He made a ton of mistakes. On top of that, there was a bunch of fumbles that weren't his fault, right? I think Jamar Chase fumbled, Chase Brown fumbled. So the Bengals were just in this game state that was just absurd. I'm not saying that we should have won that bet, right? I wouldn't say that, right? We obviously overestimated Browning. We underestimated Kevin O'Connell's ability to game script with a subpar quarterback in Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz honestly looked a little bit better than I expected. So we're going to give an upgrade to the Vikings for their offense, right? The defense should continue to be solid, and the Bengals with Browning obviously get a slight decrease. I'm not going to go that far to write them off again, but going up against a Denver defense with a really tough pass rush, guys that get a lot of pressure on the ball, I think you could see a similar issue for Browning where he doesn't have enough time to make his reads and he gets rushed and he is, aggressive, which is good, but could cost him in the case that he plays a good team that puts a ton of pressure on the ball and a team that can force turnovers in the Broncos. So I think the Broncos are a great look. The one thing I don't love about it is the Monday night primetime look. It's the absolute last game on the schedule, which I just don't love from how I'll be feeling about it perspective after seeing, whatever chaos goes down this Sunday. And, there's even 2 games on Monday. So I do think the Broncos will be slightly well used, but I think the primetime is going to throw some people off. The poorness in which Bo Nix played with last week, that's going to throw some people off, but I'll certainly be using them in a few spots. That being said, my survivor pick this week in my millions entry will be the Houston Texans. 0-3 versus 0-3 against the Titans. I am horrified. I'm scared. But I think looking at future equity, there is not another time that I'll use the Texans. I do not think the Texans are going to figure it out offensively this week. I don't think that the Texans' offense is anything better than average, even if they do figure it out. But I think that the Tennessee Titans are in such a disarray right now that at home against them, I have a hard time seeing the Texans lose this game. Titans, which we talked about with Themi, right? They switched their play calling from Callahan, who is quite possibly the worst coach in the league, over to their quarterback coach, Bo Hardegree, skipping over OC, Nick Holtz. The situation is weird. I get that they're trying to be creative, but I don't think the Titans are going to get much out of that. I don't think that's the type of thing, almost like the opposite of the Chargers versus the Giants, right? Where even though the Giants get a downgrade for going from Russ to the rookie Dart in the market, maybe the team gets a little bit of juice, right? Maybe they feel a little bit engaged, having a gunslinger out there, having a guy that everyone seems to be impressed with so far. Maybe the team gets a little bit of jolt from that. This is not a move that I think does that for the Titans. I don't think switching the play caller is going to help them fix some fundamental issues that this team has. So at this point early in the season where I have, kind of other entries I can play off of, I will be using the Texans in the millions. And that will bring me to my Sweet Gains frozen lock for week 4. My frozen lock is brought to you by Sweet Gains. Sweet Gains is a protein ice cream company providing a high protein, low calorie option to help you with your fitness goals. The Sweet Gains frozen lock is the Patriots and Panthers over 43.5. I got this at minus 105, which you can still find in market. There are various prices between 110 and 115. But I think a conversation that I'm ready to have, and I'm not sure if everyone else is Drake May a top 10 quarterback right now, right? He is 8th in EPA per play. He's 7th in success rate. He's 5th in CPOE. By market ratings, I think that the Patriots offense is pretty damn good, and Drake May is really leading that charge. That being said, the defense is quite poor. We have not really seen them go up against a bona fide, juggernaut offensively. That's not to say that the Carolina Panthers are, right? They're the Bryce Young led Panthers. After putting up a 30 piece on the Falcons and shutting them out, I'm not doing anything with the Panthers other than slightly upgrading the offense. I like that they were able to go up against a semi-decent Falcons defense, right? They were missing their top cornerback, AJ Terrell, but they went up against, probably a league average, if not slightly above league average defense in the Falcons, and they put up some points. I do not think this defense is going anywhere. Michael Penix has looked bad all year, and I think will continue to struggle a little bit. But we're not ready to upgrade the Carolina defense at all, right? The Patriots have struggled and faltered, right? When you're seeing me talk about Drake May as a top 10 quarterback, perhaps, and this offense being, in the realm of the top 15, top 12, you're not seeing that in points scored, I think, because of a lot of turnovers, right? Last week we had 5 fumbles or something ridiculous. Ramondre Stevenson, as talented as he is, cannot handle the ball. Drake May threw some untimely interceptions in the red zone, which we cannot repeat. But against the Carolina defense, they don't get any pressure on the ball. They have no pass rushers. And I mean, what's the best thing you can say about the defense is that they have stopped the run a little bit. I mean, when you're facing an Atlanta team where the guy can only look at his first read or they're going to run the ball, it's pretty one-dimensional. Like, it becomes pretty easy, quote unquote, to stop the Falcons. So I'm not at all ready to upgrade the Panthers defense. I think that the Patriots, have a really good chance to put up 30 points in this game. As long as the Panthers offense can keep up against a subpar Patriots defense or just keep the game in range, I think we have a clear path to the over. And kind of a secondary play, which I might add in the Discord. Make sure you join the Discord to get all of my plays in real time. Might be on the Patriots team total over. I haven't bet it yet, but I'll be looking kind of throughout the week to see if a number I like pops up, or if I find some new information that makes me want to add that. So that is going to do it for this episode of the Noise Podcast. There will not be an official episode next week. I'll be out of the country, but we will be putting out our picks for every game in the Discord. Again, real-time picks. Discord is the only place that you can find them. And we will have some other content. So make sure you follow us on Instagram at thenoise.media. We'll have some other content from overseas as we go on a little bit of a journey next week. But that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you guys so much for listening. Please remember to like and rate on Apple Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, any podcast platform that you use. And if you're watching me live on YouTube, thank you so much. Please remember to like and subscribe. Again, that'll do it for this episode of the Noise Podcast. This is Max Gilson. Godspeed.